The thing people don't understand is that I did not laugh to be cruel. His boss said something about warehouse pay and peaking early, and the entire table smiled, which made sense in that room full of people who earned 3 times what Omar brought home. I smiled with them. My husband stood beside me with his name tag still crooked and his hands in his pockets, and he looked at my face before I could fix it. By the end of that week, he had packed 1 bag and stopped using my name. 2 shirts, 1 lanyard, and of course the dryer kept turning without mercy. The husband stood behind me, quiet as always, while the machines shook hard. I told myself nothing was wrong because I was good at telling stories. My name was Chiara Bellini, 36, Senior Brand Partnerships Manager at Lark and Vale. I fixed rooms for money, cleaned bad headlines, and made clients sound human. At home, I wanted the same clean edges, the same controlled lighting. Omar worked inventory at North Dock, where everything smelled of cardboard and oil. He called it honest work, and of course I said I agreed. 7 years together, 3 married, and still his work shirts embarrassed me quietly. I folded them fast, like speed could hide the dust in their seams. The blue lanyard lay on top of the dryer, frayed near the clip. 1 badge, 2 keys, 3 ugly threads hanging from cheap nylon. I pushed it under his grey shirts before anyone from upstairs walked in. That was not cruelty, I told myself, only care with better taste. Omar saw the movement anyway, because quiet people see what loud people miss. He asked softly whether I still wanted coffee from the station Fridays. I heard him asking why I no longer liked the man bringing it. The old memory came in warm, which made me dislike it immediately. He used to bring paper cups before sunrise, smiling through bus fumes. I used to read his emails and smooth his words before supervisors saw them. Back then, his trust felt like love instead of another unpaid task. The boss was not in our life yet. Not really. Not by name. Still, rank had already entered our apartment and taken off its shoes. Omar said nothing about the hidden lanyard, which was his usual flaw. He carried hurt like groceries, expecting me to notice the heavy bags. I hated that expectation because it gave me no clean thing to fight. My phone lit up with Morgan's message while the washer began draining loudly. She joked that my husband had strong municipal husband energy, whatever that meant. I smiled before deciding whether the joke was small or mean. Of course I did not answer with defense because defense sounded poor. Omar thanked me for doing the wash, then lifted the hidden lanyard carefully. He clipped it to his belt without looking angry, which felt worse. The machines stopped together and the laundry room became too clear. Monday at Lark and Vale smelled like printer heat and expensive hand cream. I wore cream trousers because cream said calm, even when I was not. 3 meetings, 2 client emergencies, and 1 husband message waited behind my password. Of course I opened the client messages first, because clients knew my value. Omar had asked whether I would still come Saturday to North Dock's reception. I told myself his timing was unfair, because morning pressure made everything needy. The office looked polished from the hallway, all glass, plants, and softened voices. Morgan leaned over the partition before lunch and asked whether he was sulking. She meant Omar, but said the husband, making distance feel almost normal already. I said he was not sulking, only turning silence into household policy again. Morgan laughed softly, and of course I let that laughter become comfort today. She had always liked me sharper, because sharp women brightened her afternoons considerably. Her own life was careful, so she borrowed risk from mine whenever possible. By noon, Victor Rains arrived for the North Dock consultation upstairs alone again. The boss wore a navy coat and confidence like private weather indoors everywhere. He shook my hand longer than necessary, but not long enough to accuse. He said my crisis memo had made North Dock sound almost elegant online. I heard elegance, not North Dock, because my hunger was always selective then. Victor remembered my name before remembering which department Omar managed under him there. He called Omar dependable, which sounded clean until the room finished hearing it. Dependable meant useful, low, safe, and unlikely to be invited upstairs often enough. I smiled anyway because smiling was free and sometimes bought me admission there. He said the room needed taste and he looked at me, not Omar. Of course I called that networking, not hunger-wearing perfume and lipstick then. I said Omar had mentioned it already, making our marriage sound coordinated enough. Victor smiled like he understood coordination was never the same as importance there. I wrote nothing about his smile, which made the smile feel harmless afterward. I told Morgan the boss was charming in that terrible executive way today. She asked whether Omar knew how lucky he was to have access through me. I said Omar had access to me already, though sometimes he misused it. Morgan said that sounded playful, so she did not have to look concerned. Omar called at 4, while I reviewed captions for another nervous client upstairs. I watched his name pulse until the screen went dark without me answering. That was the first choice, though I only called it timing back then. I texted that I was buried, which was true enough to use then. I did not mention Victor, the separate invitation, or his appraising look either. A lie can enter quietly when it arrives dressed as necessary editing now. Omar sent a thumbs up, and of course that bothered me more somehow. I wanted a fight because fights make guilt look like shared damage too. After work, Morgan pulled me toward the wine bar near the tram line quickly. The place smelled of citrus peel, wet wool, and money pretending humility tonight. I told her Victor invited me because I understood polished rooms naturally already. Morgan said some men needed wives to translate them upwards socially sometimes too. I said Omar wanted no translation, only applause for staying exactly where he was. Morgan lifted her glass and said I deserved rooms that recognized my altitude. Of course I laughed, because altitude sounded cleaner than ordinary resentment tonight. At home, Omar was heating soup, still wearing his North Dock fleece again. The blue lanyard hung from the hallway hook, looking honest and impossible tonight. He had set out 2 bowls, which made my lateness look chosen already. He asked whether something had happened with Morgan after my Saturday message directly. I heard suspicion, because shame translates questions into accusations before language arrives first. He said I had sounded different since that February client dinner, maybe earlier. He named the dinner where I introduced him as the practical one publicly. I said that was affectionate because affection was easier than admitting embarrassment first. Omar said he had worn the work jacket after overtime, not laziness either. He reminded me I once said his steadiness made dangerous rooms safer once. I told him steadiness was not the same as refusing to grow either. That was moral superiority, though I called it honesty with adult edges tonight. He looked down at the soup, and the surface kept moving softly, slowly. The husband asked what had happened to being proud of him publicly anymore. I heard him demanding performance, not asking protection from what I performed publicly. Of course, I answered the question he had not actually asked me either. I said pride could not be my full-time job forever now anymore. Silence was his weapon by then, even if he never named it properly. He said the warehouse politics comment had reached Lena through group chat again. I had forgotten the line because I had felt safe writing it before. I told him Morgan exaggerated everything, and people misunderstood jokes when insecure already. Even while saying it, I saw the old cruelty moving around again. My mother's voice had once called my father small after losing work once. Now my own mouth knew the shape of that same staircase too also. Omar asked whether Victor had invited both of us, or only me separately. 1 bowl, 2 spoons, 3 seconds passed before I answered him properly finally. I said everyone was invited, which was true and not true enough anymore. His face did not change, but his hand left the spoon very carefully. That was how he showed injury, by leaving ordinary objects behind first instead. I hated him for making hurt quiet enough that I had to imagine. So I made the hurt his flaw, not the answer to mine instead. I said Victor respected ambition, and maybe Omar should learn from that now. He rinsed his bowl before eating, which felt theatrical because I needed it. Later, my phone buzzed with Morgan asking whether the husband survived dinner later. I typed that he was performing dignity, then deleted the word dignity twice. I sent shame instead because shame sounded like his problem, not mine tonight. Across town, Lena read the same group thread and stopped reacting that night. I knew because her name stayed grey beneath the last message for hours. Saturday was only 5 days away and I was already choosing the seating. Saturday arrived with rain on the warehouse windows and lemon disinfectant below rented flowers. North Dock had polished its loading atrium until it looked almost expensive from distance. I wore black satin because black forgives ambition better than nervous colours ever do. Omar wore his blue lanyard because staff were told badges stayed visible tonight. Of course I said it looked professional while hating the cheap plastic clip. 2 elevators, 1 registration table, and 3 women glanced at his badge first. I counted them because counting made humiliation feel measurable, not personal or inherited. Morgan arrived smelling like peach gloss and borrowed confidence from some louder table. She touched my arm and asked whether the husband was enjoying civilization tonight. I smiled before deciding whether she was joking with me or through me. Omar heard enough, but he only adjusted the lanyard against his shirt carefully. That carefulness annoyed me because care can accuse without using any actual words. The boss stood near the bar, holding court beneath hanging Edison bulbs tonight. Victor saw me before Omar, then waved like the room had improved noticeably. He told nearby managers that Kiara understood brand better than most agencies did. He called Omar dependable again, the same soft word wrapped around a smaller box. Of course I laughed politely, because polite laughter keeps doors from closing early. Omar asked indirectly whether I wanted water before speeches started near the stage. I heard him asking me to choose a side before anything happened tonight, so I said he could stop hovering because I knew how receptions worked. His face settled into workplace calm, which made him look smaller beside Victor. The first speeches were harmless, all growth charts, safety records, and polite applause. I stood between Morgan and the payroll woman, Lena, who watched everything quietly. Lena's smile was careful, as if she rented it for company occasions only. Victor climbed the low platform after dessert and turned praise into performance fast. He thanked departments, investors, drivers, planners, and people who knew shelf numbers better. The room laughed, warm and obedient, because bosses teach rooms when to laugh. Then Victor looked at Omar and said that no one stretched a paycheck further. He added lightly that low-rank built character when raises never arrived on schedule. A few supervisors laughed first, then customers smiled because uncertainty hates standing alone. My laugh came second after Victor's, clean enough for everyone nearby to hear. I know that order because it returns whenever a room goes silent now. Omar looked at me before looking at Victor, and that look burned strangely. It was not anger yet, only a door closing without any noise inside. I hated the door because it made me feel outside my own story. So I leaned toward Morgan and said that Omar was practical about humble numbers. I meant it as rescue, of course, which is how cruelty travels dressed. Morgan gave one short laugh, then stopped when she saw Omar's hand tremble. His fingers were pressed against the lanyard clip as if checking damage there. Lena lowered her glass and the payroll woman became witness instead of guest. Victor kept smiling because men like him can smell permission instantly in rooms. He implied that every company needed workers happy below the glass floor forever. More laughter moved across the atrium, quick, nervous, grateful to belong there tonight. My face warmed, but I mistook heat for power, not warning yet inside. The boss lifted his glass toward me like I had helped him land. That small salute fed every hungry place my childhood had left open inside. I thought I was refusing to become my mother at that table again, but of course I was using her language with better shoes now anyway. Omar stepped away before dessert plates cleared, without making a public wound visible. He went to the vending alcove where coffee smelled burnt and old again. I followed because people had begun watching me instead of the stage now. He stood beneath buzzing lights, folding the lanyard slowly into his pocket there. 2 folds, 1 breath, and no speech until I could not stand it. He asked quietly whether I heard myself when the room laughed with Victor. I heard him asking whether I was ashamed of him, which sounded controlling. So I said he was turning a joke into a trial again tonight. Omar looked at the pocket where the lanyard had disappeared from sight now. He told me indirectly that he understood where I stood when people watched. I said he wanted me punished for not worshipping his endurance anymore privately. His mouth moved once, then closed, as if words had become expensive there. That silence should have frightened me, but I called it male pride instead. Morgan appeared near the doorway, saw his face and lost her brightness quickly. She asked whether we needed anything, but her voice had no appetite left. I told her everything was fine, and of course she accepted escape gratefully. Inside the atrium, Victor started another toast while laughter rose again behind us. Omar did not return to my side before the photos were taken later. In the group picture, my hand hangs empty beside his missing shoulder space. I cropped it later because cropping was simpler than asking what vanished there. Tessa sent one message saying the evening looked tense from Morgan's posts online. I replied with a smiling face because smiling faces are small locked doors. Lena passed us near the coat table and did not meet me fully. Her silence felt professional, not hostile, which made it harder to dismiss away. The boss called Omar back for staff thanks, but Omar stayed still outside. He had crossed some private line, and I renamed it sulking immediately inside. On the ride home, rain crawled sideways across the glass between us quietly. I waited for him to start because starting would make him guilty first. He only watched his reflection with the badge missing from his chest tonight. The apartment building smelled like wet coats when we reached our floor together. Omar unlocked the door first, then handed me the keys without comment afterward. That should have sounded ordinary, but ordinary things had begun choosing sides too. The lanyard stayed inside his pocket, which made the hallway hook look accused. I wanted to ask whether he planned this little performance for me tonight. Instead, I checked Morgan's story, because witnesses matter less when distracted online elsewhere. She had posted Victor laughing, but not Omar standing near the vending machines. Of course, I told myself absence was manipulation, because absence needs translation sometimes. One reception, one laugh, and one folded lanyard had followed us home silently. I still believed the room had chosen me, which made losing everything invisible. Monday morning came grey with radiator dust and rain tapping the balcony door hard outside. Omar had slept on the sofa, not dramatically, just neatly beside the radiator again overnight. His blanket was folded square, which somehow made the room feel more accused today somehow. 2 shoes, 1 pillow, and of course his work shirt hung nearby waiting. The shoes were polished until the cheap leather gave back a careful shine again. I stood there with my phone in hand, ready to photograph absolutely nothing. For one thin second, I saw discipline instead of weakness inside him there. He had carried shame like work, not like theatre, and still arrived anyway. That thought opened too much space, so I closed it with quick motion. I texted Morgan that the husband had started performing quiet suffering very professionally again. She answered with one grey thumbs up, without joke, warmth, or follow-up question attached. Of course, I told myself she was busy, because absence needs excuses too. Omar came from the bathroom with wet hair and his face washed clean. He asked, indirectly, whether I could speak without making him smaller this morning. I heard him asking me to become guilty before breakfast, which felt unfair. So I said Saturday had been awkward, not cruel, and awkward always passed. He looked toward the mail table where the blue lanyard lay flat again. The badge faced down as if even plastic needed privacy from me now. Omar said the laugh was only the loudest part, not the first wound. He named February, the dinner, the practical introduction, and Morgan's little comments afterward. 4 examples, 1 kitchen clock, and my chest turned hard with order suddenly. I said he had been saving charges, which made him sound cold deliberately. That was my tactic now, controlled partial truth with cleaner adult hands raised. I admitted the laugh hurt him, then made his hurt seem organized afterward. He listened the way he checked inventory, quiet, exact, impossible to flatter down. The husband said he had wanted me beside him, not above him anymore. I heard beside as beneath, because my old fear translated quickly always inside. So I told him nobody could respect a man swallowing public disrespect forever. It was true enough to stand there, and ugly enough to stay afterwards. His mouth changed first, not open, just losing its last soft shape entirely. Then he picked up the lanyard and laid it beside his keys carefully. No speech, no slammed drawer, only that small rearrangement on the table between. I thought he was threatening domestic theatre, so I turned toward errands instead. By noon, Sana had sent 3 missed calls and 1 careful message already. She asked me to come by because Omar had sounded finished, not angry. Of course I went, because family judges better when faced directly first anyway. Sana's front steps smelled of wet stone and garlic from inside somewhere warm. She stood in socks, arms crossed, looking more sister than host today already. She asked why strangers had to laugh before I could feel taller there. I said she had not seen the whole evening, which was almost true. Sana said she had seen enough years of Omar explaining my sharpness gently. I heard sister loyalty, not evidence, because roles helped me dismiss people quickly. Behind her, Tessa stood in the hallway holding a covered dish awkwardly too. Tessa had come to drop food but stayed because silence demanded witnesses there. She told me, indirectly, that Omar had always defended me after dinners before. That landed wrong, because defense sounded like pity, wearing better manners there again. I said people were confusing one laugh with a marriage they disliked already. Sana's face did not move, and that steadiness irritated me more deeply today. She said the pattern had learned my voice before anyone else named it. I smiled tightly because smiling was the last polished tool I owned then. Then I explained ambition, pressure, class, and how Omar refused growth repeatedly lately. My words sounded reasonable enough that I almost believed their clean arrangement myself. But Tessa looked down, and her covered dish tilted toward the wall slightly. One friend, one sister, and of course neither reached for me there either. I left before Sana could make the doorway feel like a verdict today. At home, Omar was sitting at the table with his phone face down. The blue lanyard lay between us next to a small black notebook open. He had written dates, not paragraphs, which made the pages look colder somehow. February dinner, Morgan message, Saturday reception, group chat, vending alcove, all listed there. I did not ask why, because questions can give shapes permission sometimes quickly. Instead, I said making lists proved he wanted to punish me later publicly. Omar said, indirectly, that lists were what people made when speech failed twice. That should have opened the door again, but I stepped around it sideways. I told him he loved records because records never asked him risk pride. For the first time, his quiet looked chosen rather than helpless to me. He put the notebook away slowly, then moved his keys beside it deliberately. The lanyard stayed alone on the table, blue and frayed and waiting there. Morgan did not answer when I sent a photo of Sana's doorstep either. 2 calls, 3 messages, and 1 story posted from lunch somewhere cheerful later. Her absence was small, but it scraped louder than Sana's careful anger upstairs. Tessa texted later that she needed a little room from everything now too. Room meant distance, and distance meant people were arranging exits around me quietly. Of course I blamed Omar's silence because silence had become contagious somehow lately. That night he took the sofa again, but left the hallway light on. I lay in bed counting pipes, messages, and every missing household sound repeatedly. The apartment had not changed, yet every object seemed placed by someone else. His shoes waited beside the radiator, polished for another morning of being smaller. I wanted to touch them, which made me hate the wanting immediately afterward. The group chat icon kept glowing, small and blue beside Morgan's older joke. Lena's name sat beneath the last thread, grey, quiet, and still watching there. I told myself payroll people watched everything because their lives were narrow anyway. Then Omar's phone clicked once in the living room, not loudly, carefully again. He was not arguing now, only saving whatever shape the night had made. So I opened the group chat and typed until my fingers warmed again. Wednesday night began with radiator clicks, old soup smell, and my thumb hovering. The group chat was open, and of course Morgan's old joke sat there. I told myself I was correcting the story before it hardened elsewhere tonight. 2 witnesses, 1 sister, and 1 silent husband had already rewritten me badly. If I did not answer, their quiet would become the accepted version soon. Omar stood at the living room window, his phone dark in his hand. He had not asked me to stop, which made stopping feel childish anyway. I typed that Saturday proved Omar was ashamed, not injured by anyone there. I added that some men confuse low ambition with moral strength at home. I deleted at home, then wrote it again because truth needed weight tonight. The message went blue before fear reached the back of my throat properly. Lena's name appeared beneath it, grey and still, like a held breath there. Morgan did not react, though her silence had once been impossible before now. Then Tessa left the chat without announcement, making the screen jump slightly once. That should have hurt. So, of course, I made it strategic immediately instead. I told myself Tessa feared conflict, not that she had chosen evidence quietly. Omar turned then, and the window behind him showed 2 pale strangers there. He asked, indirectly, whether sending that message made me feel safer now inside. I heard him saying I had no right to protect myself from him. So I said his silence had protected Victor longer than my laugh ever. That was the correct thing, cruelly placed, and he knew it too well. I said Victor had mocked him for years while he swallowed everything publicly. I said he expected me to respect wounds he never defended outside home. For once, Omar did not interrupt silence with patience or household duty anymore. His face held the truth, and still refused to give me pardon tonight. He said, indirectly, that truth without loyalty was only another weapon between us. I laughed once, short and ugly, because almost true sounds powerful when cornered. He asked whether there was anything left I wanted to save with him. I heard a final test, not an open door beside me at all. So I told him I was tired of making smallness comfortable for him. The words landed flat, which made me push them harder again right then. I said he wanted devotion because achievement had stopped visiting him years ago. Omar looked at the blue lanyard lying between keys and notebook on table. He folded it once, slowly, then placed it inside his coat pocket tonight. That small movement scared me more than any shouting could have done then. I wanted shouting because shouting gives everyone something obvious to judge later publicly. Instead, he said he would handle things properly, with no performance from me. No threat, no raised voice, only a sentence closing every window between us. Of course I called it cold, because coldness sounded easier than courage tonight. I grabbed my phone and messaged Morgan before the room swallowed me completely. 3 messages, 2 calls, and 1 ridiculous voice note went nowhere at all. Morgan posted lunch photos instead, bright plates beside somebody's silver bracelet near wine. Her absence did not accuse me. It simply stopped holding me upright anymore. That was worse than Sana, worse than Tessa, worse than Omar's notebook tonight. Victor finally answered with a message too polished to belong to him personally. He said indirectly that I should avoid putting his name anywhere for now. I read protection in it, because I needed protection from someone tonight. The real word was distance, but distance sounded like losing again too early. Omar watched my face change while Victor moved himself out quietly from this. I told Omar Victor was being careful because people twist everything under pressure. Omar said indirectly that careful men always recognize fire after using matches first. I hated that sentence because it gave Victor shape instead of glamour finally. So I attacked Omar's shape again, because patterns know their way home blindly. I said his dignity was only fear wearing a clean shirt to work. He did not answer, and that made my sentence sound cheap inside me. The apartment seemed to pull away from me object by object that night. His mug faced the sink, his shoes faced morning, his coat faced departure. I still thought arrangement was punishment, because order can look aggressive when afraid. Omar lifted the notebook, tore out nothing, and placed it inside his bag. He said there was no more conversation until morning, maybe longer after that. I heard punishment again, not the boundary I had spent weeks earning myself. So I followed him down the hall, louder than the situation required then. I told him he was enjoying being the injured good man for once. Omar stopped at the bedroom door, not inside, not outside yet, of us. He said, indirectly, that being injured was not the same as being good. Then he said my refusal had finally made his next choice simple enough. Simple was the word that broke through more than anger could have done. I wanted complexity, because complexity lets a guilty person keep moving around blame. Simple meant he had left the room where I still performed for everyone. My phone lit again, and I reached for Victor instead of Omar immediately. Victor had sent nothing new, only that careful line staying visible on screen. Of course I called it restraint because abandonment had no useful costume tonight. Omar took his badge, phone, notebook and coat from the table beside me. He left the overnight bag behind, which made leaving feel temporary to me. That was my last helpful misunderstanding before the real doors opened around us. In the hallway, he did not look back toward my face at all. He looked once at the hook where the lanyard used to hang there. Then he closed the door softly, which made the softness violent inside me. I stood with the group chat open and Morgan still absent from everything. Lena's grey name sat beneath my message like a quiet receipt for later. The boss had mocked him, but I had made the joke usable publicly. I still called that survival, because survival was the prettiest lie left standing. Outside, Omar's steps faded toward the elevator, steady, organized, and gone from me. The apartment kept all its objects, but none of them chose me anymore. Friday morning, Lark and Vale smelled of glass cleaner, burnt coffee, and controlled panic. Priya Nair waited in the HR room with Lena beside the window quietly. Omar sat across from them, coat buttoned, blue lanyard hidden in his pocket. Of course I called the meeting unnecessary before anyone explained why I was there. Priya placed one document on the table and turned it toward me slowly. The title read, Notice of Formal Workplace Investigation and External Counsel Preservation Letter. My hand reached for the paper, then stopped before touching the company logo. Lena looked down, not cruelly, which somehow made her harder to fight. Priya said my fact-finding interview was scheduled for May 14, 2026. Until then, my client access was paused, and North Dock was reassigned. I asked whether my private marriage had become office entertainment for payroll staff. Priya asked why a private marriage used a client event and company thread. That was when my version failed to enter the room properly. I watched it land, slide, and lie there without being picked up. Omar did not look satisfied, which stole my easiest accusation from him. He had brought screenshots, dates, and one statement about Saturday's reception. No new secret appeared, only every public thing I had already done. Victor had already sent his own statement through HR and copied legal counsel. He said I encouraged the joke and circulated comments without his approval afterward. The boss protected himself first, of course, with polished distance and clean grammar. I wanted to call him cowardly, but cowardice had started sounding familiar. Omar stood before Priya finished speaking and asked to leave through her. The husband exited first, not angry, not waiting, not mine anymore either. His chair remained pushed in, which felt like another careful accusation. Morgan was not outside, not texting, not saving me from the hallway. I moved into Tessa's spare room, then a studio near the tram line. My bonus review froze, and 2 client accounts moved to another manager. Sana stopped answering, Tessa became polite, and Lena never used my name. Victor sent one careful email and copied people who protected him professionally. Lark and Vale removed me from client-facing work before the next Monday. I had believed laughter proved I was not small beside Omar anymore. It proved I knew exactly how to make someone else small publicly. The blue lanyard returned later in an envelope with his apartment key. I had wanted the room to choose me, and it did.